Welcome back to Face the Nation and our conversation with the #2 Democrat in the Senate, Richard Durbin. Senator, I want to read you some quotes here from various people, including Senator Schumer, who in 2015 said a government shutdown would deal a huge blow to our economy. Bernie Sanders said it is wrong for the right-wing Republicans to ignore the results of the last election and hold the American people hostage by threatening to shut down the government. You said, open the government. When you open the government, we'll open negotiations. So why was it bad then and okay now?
It's not a good thing to do at any point. We've reached a desperate situation. This was the fourth continuing resolution. The Republican-controlled Congress has refused to fund the government, been unable to fund the government. They can't resolve the issues within their own ranks. And so they give us one continuing resolution after the next. And now we are piling up all the things that need to be done. And now we are facing a deadline created by President Trump when it comes to DACA. So we feel there's an urgency for us to come together and do it quickly. And I hope it's just a matter of hours or days. But we need to have a substantive answer, and the only person who can lead us to that is President Trump. This is his shutdown.
They obviously say it's yours, and that's what we're in. But the deadline's not till March. Why shut things down now?
Listen, it's been 4.5 months since President Trump set this deadline and said that 780,000 young people who are protected in this country from deportation and can legally work are going to start losing that protection, 1,000 a day on March 5th. What have the Republicans in the Senate done in the 4.5 months since? Nothing. What we have done, 3 Republican, 3 Democratic senators, is to craft a bill, to put this bill before our colleagues and to put it before the president on a bipartisan basis. We're trying to solve the problem the president created.
Speaker Ryan, you heard him. He was out here. He said they've had their solutions on DACA, but it's the Senate Democrats who are filibustering.
What he said, unfortunately, and Paul's my friend, is he refers to this bipartisan negotiation. Kevin McCarthy, whom I like very much, we've been doing this for 12 days. 12 days with this deadline looming. Our bill that we crafted, our bipartisan bill, took 4 months. We took it seriously. We took the president's invitation to offer a bill seriously, as Chuck Schumer did when he went down to the White House. President Donald Trump has to step up and lead us at this point. He can do it.
You know, you've gone back to the president's comments where he said, I'll take whatever bill. But it's perfectly reasonable for a president to take into consideration all the moving pieces. If he says, OK, we'll go with the Durbin bill, that'll never pass the House. Plus, he's got his own constituencies. I mean, he's allowed to change his mind, isn't he?
Of course he is. But at some point, he has to make a decision. Make a decision about whether or not we're going to go forward as a nation. That's what we've been waiting on. And as we look at this issue, whether it's DACA or the larger agenda that Chuck Schumer has addressed, he'll make a decision, he'll embrace it, and within 2 hours do a pirouette and be off in another direction.
What is the position among Democrats right now on funding the wall? The president wants $18 billion or $20 billion. Is there a number now that Democrats are...
Chuck Schumer made a significant offer to the president, and it wasn't just an authorization, although I think that is the way you run a government. You authorize a project, and then you say to the administration, give us your plans. How are you going to spend the money? We don't want to waste it. But he also made a concession to the president on actual appropriations, so the president would not be slowed down at all. Do you know how much money from the 2017 appropriation for walls and fences and barriers has been spent so far? 1%.
Did he meet the president's terms in that meeting?
I think he did, because the president said we have an understanding. 2 hours later, called him and said it's off.
Let me ask you about that Oval Office meeting. It's been adjudicated like crazy, but you have Republican senators questioning you. What does that make the cloakroom like when you're passing them? Do you say, hey, wait a minute, you've said I told an untruth and don't go doing that? Do you I mean, it should lead to confrontation of some sort.
John, I stand by every word. My Republican colleagues know exactly what the president said, and I do too. I was the only Democrat in the room. At least one other Republican, Lindsey Graham, has said that I was accurate, what I said. Others have said they've forgotten. We had the Secretary Nielsen of DHS. She seemed to forget the words that were said. I can't forget them.
All right, Senator Durbin, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll be right back with our panel. It's time for some political analysis. Joining us now, Ruth Marcus, columnist and deputy editorial page editor of The Washington Post. Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic. Ben Domenech is founder and publisher of The Federalist. And Ed O'Keefe covers Capitol Hill for The Washington Post and is a CBS News contributor. Ed, I want to start with you. Where are we right now?
Well, see, I think this is all because you're leaving town. We'll call this the Dickerson shutdown. Look,
will not go viral.
Right. Look, the Senate reconvenes this afternoon. House Republicans are huddling this afternoon to try to figure out what might happen among them. There is a group of moderate senators who are meeting in the offices of Susan Collins, trying to sort of see if there's enough support to reopen the government till February 8th and then slam out all the unfinished business, which might include immigration or it might not. And the reason this group thinks they have a chance is because Majority Leader McConnell has said to them, if you get everything else done, disaster funding, the actual budget, reauthorizing the Children's Health Insurance Program, but you can't do immigration, I'll give you a vote on immigration separately. And that might be a few different options. And then at that point, it will require the President and House Republicans to signal which one they like, and then maybe that issue gets resolved. So could be a late night, but we're not there yet.
Ben, okay, we just saw a lot of who shot John here, despite John's attempts to try to figure out who's doing the shooting. We're going to all try and rise up out of this for a moment. What does this mean? Is there a bigger thing here, or is this just a spat and we're going to be moving on to the next thing?
I think this is the perfect way to end the first year of the Trump presidency, which is that this is a tale of two presidencies, in the sense that, on the one hand, if you had rewound the clock and told Paul Ryan 2 years ago that 2 years from now you're going to have a Republican president, you'll have passed the most significant tax reform since Ronald Reagan, you'll have an economy that's booming, wages that are increasing, unemployment is going to be down, you'll have withdrawn from the Paris climate deal, you'll have mostly killed ISIS, you would have a very happy Paul Ryan, except that you also have to tell him that even though 58% of the people approve of the presidency on the economy, 58% of them are also opposed to him or unfavorable to him, as Ed O'Keefe's Washington Post most recently said this week, which indicates basically that we're at this point where we have to ask ourselves, is it still the economy stupid? Is that really the most important thing? Or is the kind of craziness that has come with this presidency and with the constant negotiation, not just via the White House meetings, but via television, via his tweets, et cetera, has that had enough of an impact that it now puts Republicans on a road toward a very difficult 2018 midterms? And
Ruth, Democrats are taking advantage of what they think is the answer to Ben's question, which is, this is an unpopular president. We want to win points with our constituency by having a shutdown here and making Republicans, putting them in a bad spot with an unpopular president.
Sure, and that's understandable. I think the reality of a shutdown is whoever wins the battle of the hashtags, hashtag Schumer shutdown, hashtag Dickerson shutdown, hashtag Trump shutdown, nobody wins, everybody loses. It drags down everybody to the extent that it does, and then people forget it. People are going to particularly forget it in this kind of disaster episode, craziness du jour Washington that we're living in. So the question is, what makes this shutdown different from all other shutdowns? And the answer, I did that for Goldberg, and the answer is, this is the first one-party shutdown we've had. And so we have this situation where the president and a Congress, both houses of which are controlled by his own party, can't even get the government funded. I know, 51 votes, everything else.
Well, that's
but
not
that's
unimportant.
that's the reality, and those are the rules that you're living with. Right. Work it out.
Talking about who's going to forget this and who's not. Who's not going to forget this? The Chinese leadership. They're not going to forget this moment. They're watching. Talk about a one-party shutdown. They think to themselves, well, we have one party and we don't shut down our government. The issue is the signaling here. Over and over again, this country is signaling to allies and adversaries that it can't run itself. That's the lasting impact of this. And I think if you talk about lifting up and thinking about what does this mean in the long term, we'll forget this shutdown, but other people won't. And people are watching around the world and thinking this is a completely dysfunctional country.
I have to dispute a little bit this meme that has been out there quite a lot, that this is a one-party shutdown. The government shut down 5 times under Carter, including with significant Democratic majorities. The difference is that shutdown was fundamentally different because of the different ways that people were being paid.
It wasn't a real shutdown. It didn't shut things down.
But
it lapsed
now we're doing
funding.
the meaning of shutdown.
I think the meaning of shutdown also shifts too. I mean, Mick Mulvaney was a fan of shutting down the government back in 2013 in almost exactly the same scenario where you're shutting it down over an issue that is not related to continuing to run the government. There is always a strain of conservatism that believes, as Jesse Helms did, that every day these buildings are closed, the republic grows stronger. And that's something that does, I think, have a real strain within it. I actually don't think, though, that this one will have the kind of political consequences long-term, simply because the one in 2013 didn't play out the way that we thought.
Yeah, Republicans got blamed in the
and
short
also
term,
the
and
news
they won
cycle
in
is so frenetic that we'll move to the next crisis.
We aren't even talking about the doctor's, press conference the other day.
Or other things.
Ed, let's bring the president into this. Again, regardless of where anybody wants to place blame, the president is not absent from participation in American government, and this one made specific promises about fixing the kind of messed up situation that we are now presently in. What's the accurate way to think about the president's role in this?
The accurate way, I think, is that Tuesday meeting, most of which was televised, was a breakthrough moment that a lot of people thought was going to avoid what we're now dealing with. But that Thursday confrontation, where bad words were used, probably sealed the fate of the situation we're in, simply because they brought to him what he asked for, a bipartisan agreement. The problem is certain supporters of his weren't involved in that bipartisan agreement. But you don't need Tom Cotton necessarily to pass something in the House and the Senate.
You don't, but Jeffrey, John Kelly, when Bret Baier interviewed him, said, bringing in those conservative viewpoints is my job to put all the information in front of the president. So that may mess up the deal, but it's the way a White House is supposed to work.
Well, the interesting thing here is that what he's showing is that he knows the art of the instigation, but the art of negotiation is really eluding him. And I do find it interesting. And what you're hearing inside the White House is that we don't know what he thinks, and we don't think he has the attention span to bear down on these issues. So the shutdown is in part a product of drift, leaderless drift.
I want to follow up on that, because you've sort of alluded a few times to the president's statement at the convention in Cleveland, I alone can fix it. Well, it turns out that, first of all, you can't fix Washington alone, no president can, and also that he may be uniquely ill-suited to fix this situation. Senator Schumer said negotiating with him was like negotiating with Jell-O. I've made a Jell-O mold or two in my day, and I'd like to say I think that's unfair to Jell-O, because Jell-O, once it sets, keeps its shape. This is a president whose shape shifts depending on who the last person is he spoke to. And the way that people, his chief of staff, the Senate Majority Leader, are talking about him, we have to wait till he figures out what he thinks, he's evolving, is really pretty remarkable, and it goes to those two presidents that Ben was talking about.
But Ed, with other presidents, Clinton, FDR, the shape-shifting and the telling one person one thing and the next person the next thing was considered actually a talent and an art. Right. So just having multiple positions is not by itself bad for a president. Some people think it's crucial.
Yeah, and because in those cases they were shifting to cut a deal, and they kept in that position. The problem with this guy is, 9 a.m. he's here, 3 o'clock he's here, 8 o'clock he's somewhere else, and that is part of the struggle that Republicans especially will tell you makes this difficult. And
depends if it's strategic or not.
Right. And before, add to whatever you were going to say to this, which is this art of instigation. Yes. That ad being run by the Trump campaign, in this context, how do you see that ad, and then add whatever you want?
There's a line from Chesterton that politicians in opposition are expert in the means to some end, and in office they are an expert on the obstacles to it. I think that the fact is that Trump was, as a candidate, not someone as entirely familiar with the obstacles, namely something like needing to get sufficient Democrat votes to continue to have this government running under a continuing resolution. But I also think that part of what you're seeing here with Kelly bringing those other conservative voices in speaks to something interesting about this president's first year, which is that it has been a much more conservative year than I think we could have expected from candidate Trump. He is much more conservative as a president than generic Republican. In terms, if you think of generic Republican as being Mitt Romney or someone along those lines, he has been much more aggressive. I think you saw that this week in terms of Washington experiencing the pro-life March for Life that happens every year, followed by the Women's March on the other side. This, it's not just his nature, it's not just the craziness, it's also the ideology that has created a very tribal environment, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
There is this interesting interesting phenomenon going along. Ben's colleague, Molly Hemingway, just wrote that she's elated that the president turned out not to be progressive. One of the local Washington newspapers.
Gotta say.
And it was fascinating because there were such low expectations on the part of conservatives that he would actually be dispositionally conservative. So it's one of those sort of markers of a year that John Kelly is bringing him these conservative views, but he's very receptive to them. It's not as if there's an argument to sort of move him to the right.
Right, a way in which maybe his shifting positions have, in the end, helped conservatives rather than. Ruth, let me ask you this question about the point Ben made, which is it may not be the economy stupid. In our poll, 67% say the economy is very or fairly good, but the president's approval rating is 37%. What does that disconnect mean, if anything? Because the president should have better approval ratings when the economy is doing so well.
A president with an economy this good should have better approval ratings. No president at the end of his first term has ever had approval ratings this low. Therefore, something is going on that tells us precisely what you said. It's not the economy stupid. And if you look underneath at some of the other questions that are asked, people are rattled by this president. They are rattled by, they may be happy or unhappy about his ideology, but many of them have had questions, I think, in the Washington Post poll about whether he was mentally stable. That is a scary moment in American democracy.
Unfortunately, I gotta cut it there.
Oh, that's right.
Well,
I want to thank you guys are my favorite part of this show, but I'm afraid Jeffrey's about to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry, John, but we actually want to seize control of the show from you for the last minute. It's a long time coming. We want to turn this into a little bit of a Trump cabinet meeting and go around the horn and praise you. And I would start by simply saying that we've all enjoyed your hosting, your moderating, and we think that your civility and restraint and persistence and intelligence have been a great boon to us and a great boon to your viewers.
And John, I would like to say that I feel blessed to have sat around this table with your broad-shouldered leadership.
Ruth Marker starring as Mike Pence.
No one has ever said that before. And on a more serious note, might get a little choked up here, Washington is part of your DNA, it's part of your heritage, it's part of your heart. We're not sending you to New York, we're just loaning you to New York. We expect you back.
Thank you.
John, you are honorable, decent, and fair, which is something that is very rare in Washington, and even rarer still, you've managed to be those things while remaining very interesting. We will miss you very much, and we know the best is yet to come.
And one of the things that viewers may not appreciate is I talked to people up at the Capitol when this announcement was made, and they said, you know, he's the only one of the guys that hosts one of these shows that actually still shows up here. He still reports. And one of the dirty secrets is that sometimes people get these jobs and they don't do that anymore, and you have, and it is widely appreciated.
Thank you.
Bravo,
Thanks to all
John.
of you. Thank you, just as I wrote them. I'll miss you all, and we'll be back in a moment. This week, former Senate Majority Leader and 1996 Republican presidential nominee Bob Dole was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. He showed his trademark wit.
I want to thank all those who have said such kind words about me. They're probably not true, but they were nice.
And his generosity.
And I also want to thank my colleagues, for without them, nothing would have been accomplished.
As we were looking over his career, there are plenty of echoes to today. As Congress tries to break out of the government shutdown, we were reminded of Dole's role in a bipartisan attempt to avert a shutdown in 1991, and his appeal to compromise.
The naysayers, the nitpickers may have a field day because the easy vote in this case is to find something you don't like and vote no. But in my view, we owe more to the American people than finding fault with what I consider to be a good agreement.
And as the president defends himself against charges of racism, Dole's words at the 1996 Republican convention have also been circulating on social media.
But if there's anyone who has mistakenly attached himself to our party in the belief that we are not open to citizens of every race and religion, then let me remind you, tonight this hall belongs to the party of Lincoln, and the exits, which are clearly marked, are for you to walk out of as I stand this ground without compromise.
Senator Dole has been a guest on Face the Nation 63 times, and his career also touched the lives of two of us on this show. Me as a young reporter covering his campaign for Time magazine and in need of a haircut, and our executive producer Mary Hager, covering him for CBS both as a campaign embed and on Capitol Hill. For recognition of a career serving and sacrificing for his country. Congratulations, Senator Dole. Back in a moment. In the hallway to the Face the Nation offices, there is a picture from the last presidential campaign. The staff is gathered around our executive producer Mary Hager's computer. We're staring at the famous Billy Bush tape just after it was released. That picture represents something fundamental about this show, which I will leave today as the full-time host. That was an extraordinary moment, but the picture captures what we do each week. We look hard at the news and then launch into the same thing that happened after that picture was taken. We throw ourselves into trying to figure out what something means and who we can bring on the show to help us understand it better. It is a group effort. I have had the privilege for the last 2.5 years of meeting you here for an hour each Sunday. What you don't see are the other 167 hours in the week when all the people you don't see are working to make our hour together go smoothly. It starts almost the minute we go off the air when executive producer Mary Hager is already thinking about who we should book for the next show. Arrayed all around me right now are the people who get up long before the sun and work long after it has gone down, who chase down the host's every last query, save him from getting a fact wrong, coax the teleprompter, replace a guest who has gotten sick at the last minute, frame the shot, keep the batteries fresh in the microphone packs, poke all these lights over my head, search for the right interview location, wrangle time, space, and security guards at those locations when we take the show on the road, chase reluctant public officials, keep my forehead from looking shiny, and drain pot after pot of coffee in the edit room. They give up their weekends and they give up planning. Because when you work in the news, birthdays, anniversaries, and commitments to your kids and your parents get overturned. They do all of this because they are committed. They want to tell you what's going on as best as we can figure it, and believe that we can give you some control over your world by helping you understand it. I'm proud of what they do and proud to have been a part of doing it alongside them. To all of you out there, thank you for your trust, your loyalty, and your generosity. I'm moving on to CBS This Morning, but maybe I'll be lucky enough to come back and fill in someday. You're in good hands, though, as you've always been. For Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson. Almost done it.